Hi everyone, this is Prinza, and with me here is Stanley, co-founder and CTO at Ankr. And in this episode, we'll be talking about probably one of those topics that just doesn't get that much attention on internet. Like not a lot of people talk about it. And that is, of course, Web3 infrastructure. Because you have seen people talk about decentralization all the time. We have seen people talk about, how to build dApps or decentralized application, but not a lot of people know the importance of building your dApps or hosting your dApps on like decentralized infrastructures. So, Stanley, moving on with that discussion, right? When we talk about Web 1, it was just all about introducing people to the internet itself, right?
Mhm.
And then Web 2 happened, which was all about converting the time people spend on internet and the content they share into a real business. And so somewhere along the way, a few companies just got or gained a lot of traction. And one of them, of course, being Amazon. What do you think? Like, why are companies like AWS or GCP or even Azure not found doing Web3 infrastructure?
Okay. So to answer that questions, I would say it probably the answer is yes or no. Because you can see definitely a lot of Web3 company, including very famous exchange like Binance, they all built on the top of Amazon AWS. I would say if you go to the coin market cap and list the top 100 blockchains, probably all of them more or less use AWS already. However, the question I think here is why Amazon or these top-notch cloud provider do not provide cloud service, cloud blockchain-based cloud-based blockchain service at this moment. I think there are a couple of reasons. One of the reasons definitely is legal. Because blockchain is still a very vague for its legal status in the United States. So I think the big company will be a little bit cautious. And also on the technology side, blockchain itself is more about a verticals in terms of the cloud service. It's not like something fundamental for the cloud infrastructure such as EC2 or S3, basically storage and computing. Just digression a little bit. So basically, cloud computing, most of the cloud computing focus on the either computing, storage, bandwidth, network, or things like that. Blockchain is more like a application to utilize this cloud service. And also, I think if there is a cloud service specialized or targeting for the blockchains, I think for Amazon, it's more or less like Amazon Marketplace. So maybe some vendor can write a cloud formation script, and any user who want to use it can easily bootstrap using the EC2 instance to power the blockchain node, and use the AMI with pre-imaged binaries to launch the node quickly, and then use the EBS snapshot to copy the data instantly. When I say instantly, it could be within minutes. So that can be fully automated. So based on this, background, it's really hard. It's really hard to say cloud service will provide a dedicated service says it's belong to blockchain. However, I think the most possible, I would say, the most possible service cloud provider can do is probably the storage and also the snapshot, because that require effort to maintain the latest copy, and that also is something most of company who need for example, archive data or whatever. Of course, they can use Ankr for that, but if they want to have their own dedicated copy, I think they want someone to provide it, and they are willing to pay for it. I think that's the service actually the cloud provider can do. But for the rest of them, it's more like the legal. Every part's already provided by Amazon, by GCP, and or Microsoft Azure. I think for them, they will probably prefer to let the developer to be innovative enough to have its own use case. I think basically that's the reason. Yes.
But also, like you talked about verticals, you talked about storage itself, right?
Mhm,
But they say that whoever controls the server controls the world, right?
mhm.
So do you see like Amazon or AWS or just Azure or GCP, like how are these Web3, like how are these companies, or maybe just how Web3 is going to be a threat to centralization and monopoly that they were trying to create around the Web3 services or web services in general?
It's a complicated questions. I think every coin has its own two sides, right? So we cannot deny Amazon as a centralized service create a very, very awesome infrastructure for the internet space. So compared to like 10 years ago, think about if you want to, create a website, right? And have a server to download the data or aggregate the data, accumulate data, and do a little bit data mining work. How much money you need to pay, and how long the development cycle you need to wait. Amazon and also and Microsoft and Google jointly make effort to make this barrier very low for even the entry level data miners or developer nowadays. So I think for that part, it definitely to benefit the entire ecosystems. I mean, entire human ecosystems, without monopoly. I will say without monopoly, and also the high margin to accumulate by Amazon's. It's very, very hard to say anyone have any incentive to achieve that. So, but decentralizations or the Web3 is not meant to, to take down all of these great things Amazon or other cloud provider has been built during these 10 years or 20 years. I think the way of Web3 is more like the new way of thinking, the new way of the design patterns. We can do distribute and we can design the application in a decentralized ways. I mean, not just use Amazon, right? You can use Google, you can use Microsoft, and to make sure your service do not depend on one single cloud provider. I can give one example. I have when I at Amazon a long time ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago. At that time, it's Netflix. When the Netflix come to shape, there is a Christmas. I think Amazon has some problem with the S3 at that time, so Netflix suffered during the Christmas holidays. You can imagine that probably is the most revenue generating period for the entire years. So I think Netflix take that lessons, and they build their systems bear the decentralizations in mind. So what does that mean? At that time, you don't have much choice for the cloud provider. So they says, okay, our service do not depend on each individual servers. And then our server do not depend on individual availability zone. Then our service do not depend on the individual locations. So they create a project. I think it's called Chaos Monkey, Chaos Gorilla, and a Chaos King Kong, to simulate the situation or events that one server is down or one availability zone is down and the one location of AWS is down. So that kind of the mindset should bear into every Web3 individual developers. I know it's hard, and it's have a lot of extra work you need to do to deliver the real D app. If you do everything yourself. Actually, one of Ankr's goal is to make sure this effort this hard or difficulty is bared by Ankr service. So for the developer, they can easily to join. But all in all, I think Web3 is a new way of thinking, new way of design pattern, and new way of development. Infrastructure is just infrastructure. You can use Web3 infrastructure, but design a very centralized service. But you can also use centralized service, design a very decentralized application. So this is more human questions instead of technology. I think we shouldn't treat the existing giants of the cloud provider as the barrier. They did great things in the past, and we should utilize the service they build and utilize the milestone they have achieved and deliver better service using Web3 thinking.
talking about the exact same dynamics. I think we are still seeing a few Web3 infrastructure companies wrapping their services on top of just Amazon or just Google Cloud platforms, right? Are there any risk involved in terms of single point of failure or something else?
Right now, for the D app, definitely people should, as I mentioned for previous questions, you should put the decentralizations thinking into your design patterns. So do not, if there are any particular suggestion I can make, do not use individual servers to power your service. And because that definitely is a single point of failure. And do not use the individual server to host your website, or to respond to as a backend service. Definitely think about to have more. If you have choice, definitely think about have more servers and also load balancing across different backend server to serve the request from browser or things like that. I think for the typical D app, you will have front end, which means a website. You will have smart contract, and you will have maybe or maybe not. You will have the backend. I think for all of them, there is decentralizations technology can help to make sure there's no single point of failure. Smart contract part definitely is already in the blockchains, and there's no need to mention that much about smart contract. However, for the website, I definitely encourage use the single page applications, like use the flat platform as React, Vue.js, or any kind of that platform. And hosted, not using the server, using the CDN, and resolve the DNS directly to the CDN network. So if someone can crack down the entire CDN, then that guy is very, very powerful. That guy should do the probably the Bitcoin mining and do that kind of things. And also for entire CDN to go offline, that's kind of hard. Since I cannot imagine when I hear like any CDN network get down, but I definitely hear like one of the maybe a product get down because of the server problem, but never the CDN have that kind of issues. The last part is the backend. I think right now most of the companies or teams still use servers to host the backend. That's good part. But right now you should think about decentralization ways. Couple of suggestions. So if you want to just trigger smart contract, think about the protocols like automated, decentralized smart contract executor. Ankr is working on one of the solutions, but there are definitely existing solutions in the space. I think Chainlink has one of the solutions. Definitely think about that. If you says, okay, I do something more than that. For example, I need to have the database and do a little bit calculations. I don't want to put that into a smart contract to save the cost for each individual user. Okay, you need to bear the cost. However, to design, definitely think about serverless architecture. If you can use the Lambda or Worker to serve your backend, and using API gateway, and also you yourself take care of the authentications or things like that, I think that would be better architectures than just using single server. But generally speaking, the single point of failure is most of time fall into your design, right? If you design that way, you will know it. There are technology to get around of it, and so I think we should embrace the new way of the design of these applications. Yes.
So you also mentioned about your background working at Amazon, right? So you have a very interesting background, because before you started this Web3 infrastructure company, right, you were actually working for Amazon, which is, I mean, as it said, like it's a Web2 infra provider, right? So you have experience of like working in both the worlds. So tell me, like, what are the differences between FAANG infrastructure companies or just Web3 infra providers like Ankr? How is it like working for, I mean, of course, now you are working as a CTO and co-founder, there are like more responsibility, but in terms of ethos, how are these two paradigms very different?
Yes. So infrastructure can fall into all level of the architecture. So you can think about like basically you want to build a road and the electricity as the infrastructure, right? Definitely this is not what we are talking about here. I think for the major cloud provider, as I mentioned before, they focus on the infrastructure such as computing, storage, bandwidth, network, all these kind of generic resource for you can think about it's computer science. Yes, they are more focusing on that. So therefore, they provide the product like EC2. They deliver you a virtual machine or virtual servers. And that virtual server, you don't need to care where it's hosted, which hardware server is hosted, or how many hardware server is in the backend to ensure this virtual machine can always up and running. There are a lot of technology built around it. So things like you want to make in the design of Amazon EC2, Amazon definitely have some regulation, not regulation, the design pattern. What's the best way? They have their requirement for the data center in the first place. So for example, the hardware server must be within 2 years old. So if more than that, Amazon won't take it. You have to take it away. And also on the technology side, Amazon will definitely do the live migration, which means if one server is down or have problems, or just for the health check, the virtual server will be migrate or move to another hardware service. However, for you, it look like it's still up and running without any downtimes. This is all the technology Amazon tried to build. Web3, yes, you can use or build servers on the top of that, but in my opinion, that's also one of the reasons why Ankr built our infrastructure to serve the Web3 company, is that it sounds like over design and over engineer for the Web3 world. Why? Because the Web3 world, it's what should I say? It's more like error proof, or can tolerate errors in the first place. So if one Web3 server is down, you definitely use another server to take care of the traffic, take care of the load automatically. So sounds like you do not need to have that kind of SLA to make sure the virtual server itself is running 24/7. It's totally making perfect sense if I am providing service as cloud provider, providing service to a Web2 company, right? Or like provide service to the government. I definitely want to ensure it's uptime like 24/7. But for the Web3, it's P2P network. By its nature, you don't need that. the network itself can take care of that. If one RPC node is down, the traffic should automatically shift to another service. And that's why we think to build the infrastructure ourselves can dramatically bring down the cost any Web3 company need to have its own the applications or the apps. And also the RPC. The RPC is the very, very fundamental service for the Web3 world. So Web3, basically, you can think about blockchains. But what does that mean? Application run on top of the blockchain. Basically, you want to have an interface to read data and write data, just like the database, right? So RPC is the interface to that database in the blockchain world. So basically every Web3 company needs that to do anything in the blockchain space. So that's why we think this is the fundamental service. Everybody needs it. And with our technology, we can benefit everyone who want to connect to the blockchain. Even you use like MetaMask, want to send a transaction to Phantom, Binance Smart Chains, or things like that. You need to have a RPC service to ensure your transaction do propagate to the validators. So I think that's the fundamental thinking between different cloud provider. it didn't mean Amazon or AWS or any cloud service provider do anything wrong. It just the use cases do not fit into that heavy or that advanced technology here, and it's, as I said, over engineering for it. And also for the generic public, when they need to use a service, I think the Ankr RPG service can definitely meet maybe 99.99% of the use case. Of course, I have to admit there is enterprise usage or enterprise requirement have the specification on the top about, for example, the latency, right? How about the propagation times? And also how about the, what should I say? Yeah, the distribution of the node across the globe. All of that require more. It has more requirement on the infrastructure itself. For that case, yes, cloud service may start to making sense because they have high requirement of the service. However, still, Ankr ourselves can bring a specialized service to meet to satisfy that that latency requirement, that propagation requirement at that time, and still bring down the cost using the similar ideas of decentralizations and also failover mechanisms. So yeah, but basically, I think still the major difference is in the way of design. Yeah, both company all make sense to me. It just it serve different use case here.
It means like we should be expecting some kind of relation between Web2 and Web3 infrastructure companies moving ahead, like in near to long-term futures, right?
Yes.
So that brings me to the last question. So like, what are the things Web2 infrastructure providers need to know before they tap into this Web3 space? Because you might have like some of the insight building this huge, infra provider company itself.
Yeah, I will definitely says understanding the Web3 technology. So yeah, because most of the blockchain is very similar to each other because at the very beginning they probably just fork each other, right? And most of them can go back to the mainstream blockchain like Ethereum, Bitcoin, Polkadot, or Cosmos or things like that. They are very similar to each other. So I think for Web3 infrastructure provider or Web3 cloud company, when they enter to Web3 space, do not think that it's just another legal applications, which means using the existing service to solve it. It's not that easy. Of course, if the customer is willing to bear the cost, it's their choice, but it's not the best choice. Definitely go much deeper and think about how data is organized and what is the I/O requirement and what is the space requirement for the storage, and also how it serve the traffic. I mean, we need to have a highly optimized service and a highly easy accessible service for the Web3s. I still think for Amazon or Google or Azure, they can provide awesome service if they really want to. But again, never think about it just say Lego with their existing service. Dig into it and understand the algorithm, and then give the optimization, or sometimes even go to the data center levels to optimize the service. I think this is their my recommendations, and see if they are willing to do that or not. What I can not promise, but what I can maybe a little bit show off is that Ankr is a very Web3 native company. Yeah, just like Amazon says, cloud native. Ankr is very blockchain native companies, and we understand the blockchain algorithm very deeply. And a lot of service we provide, we even change the source code of the mainstream software or cloud blockchain software, and to serve the traffic or to serve the use case of our client. So definitely check out Ankr.com or the documentation page we have, and to get more familiar with our service.